do you wish to ask of him, Master? Protocol. This will be a very sensitive topic, Master. You will want to be careful with your questions or risk offending him. Not that that is much of a worry. Translation. Translation. You have been told that to be considered worthy of hearing the histories, you need to bring him a dragon pearl from a great dragon. Translation. He says the discussion is closed until you fulfill this condition. He thinks you are just making fun of his traditions. Translation. Translation. He is stupefied, Master. He never thought you could return with such an item. Such a thing has not been done in many years. Translation. He will allow you to meet the storyteller, but also gives a warning. If you dare to repeat the histories incorrectly, you will be killed. Translation. The storyteller will be summoned to one of the rooms here in the Enclave. He seems to think this is a great honor for you, Master. Translation. Translation. He says that the fact that you have to ask, this is just one more example of your ignorance as an outsider, Master. He says you are blind. Translation. His people believe they are part of the land, living with it. You and your kind dare to raise yourself above it. You remove yourself. Translation. That act of removal makes you an outsider, separate from all that is important. You could never understand how unwelcome you are. Translation. Translation. We are free to leave. Translation. He identifies himself as the storyteller, Master. He has been told of your warrior skills and will speak the history to you. Translation. Translation. There is only one accepted history, passed orally to each successive generation. Translation. A book or datapad can be taken away, cheapening the value of what it contains. To commit it to paper or storage is to remove it from the people. Translation. Translation. You may choose to hear the history, or you may choose not to. Their history is a single entity that cannot be partitioned. Translation. The only exception is in continuing the tales once they have begun. If you leave, when you return, he will continue from where he left off. Translation. Translation. It begins with the ancient times. They were not sand people, for there was no sand. The land was green with life, and they walked without wrappings. Translation. Though the land was beautiful, they lived apart from the land. They built their walls high and saw beyond the horizon. They dared to reach the stars. Translation. There are no words for how long ago this was. It was before the outsiders, before the abduction, before the cities fell, before the builders. Translation. Translation. His arrogant people touched the stars, and this sin drew the attention of the builders. The builders did not touch the stars, they lashed them to millstones. Translation. Great demons of metal stripped the world of its riches until all that was left was the green of the ground. The great cities were lifted away. Translation: those that had used the wealth were taken along with it. Transgressors abducted to serve past the sky, seeding the stars with penitent, adaptable slaves. Translation: Translation: there came a time when the builders were also judged for their crimes. After generations, a plague weakened them, and the time of the Great War began. Translation: the builders faltered, and his people realized why they had been punished, so that they understood the crime, and would now strike down the greater offender. Translation: they worked chaos in the machines, so they destroyed themselves. The builders fought back, laying waste to the green that had been misused with fire from above. Translation: soil became glass, grinding to sand, but the fight was long planned, and his people were safe. Deep in cave homes carved from valley wall, they were free. Translation: editing, if I may, Master. This section of his tale details several millennia of the Long Walk, their nomadic wanderings as they accept their identity in a desert world. Rather than strain my circuits on his dialect, might we just assume there was much fighting over who has the biggest bantha and move on to more recent things? Resignation. Very well, Master. Translation: the tribes spread far, distant from each other, but all the sand people and all cherished the land that remained. The sand would not be misused. Translation: then machines fell from the stars again, outsiders like you that brazenly walked apart from the land. And greater still was the insult to come. Translation: these outsiders reminded them of their past transgression, of the time when they too walked apart from land. The outsiders, your kind, looked like their ancient abducted. Translation: so it is to the current sons that the Sand People hate all outsiders and give them no footing. You come again, time after time, adaptable slaves to the machine. Editing. The last 1,000 years are full of conflicts with different groups of attempted planetary settlers, all of whom are poorly described, long dead, and likely untraceable. I believe I have truncated it down to the usable bits in what was already said. I hope it is enough, Master. Cautionary. I should warn you, Master, that any questioning of their interpretation may be seen as trying to change the meaning of what was said. Clarification. They may consider this to be speaking the words in error, a blasphemy they would attempt to kill you for. Obedient. I will ask whatever you wish, Master. Translation. Translation. The tribes spread far, distant from each other, but all the Sand People and all cherished the land that remained. The sand would not be misused. Translation. Then machines fell from the stars again, outsiders like you that brazenly walked apart from the land. And greater still was the insult to come. Translation. These outsiders reminded them of their past transgression, of the time when they too walked apart from land. The outsiders, your kind, looked like their ancient abducted. Translation. So it is to the current sons that the Sand People hate all outsiders and give them no footing. You come again, time after time, adaptable. Translation. translation. We are free to leave.
What can I do? How can I help? About my mother? I'm unsure. I seem to find it difficult to remain objective when it comes to her. I find that disturbing. Do you think I should? That would just lead to another argument. I always despise talking to her. I'll think about it. I should try and remember my training. I should be able to let go of this, but I can't. I don't want to talk about this anymore. Let's keep going.